A couple of weeks ago, I participated in the Translating Europe Forum in Brussels, and I thought I could share with you some of the most relevant thoughts that were addressed in our panel, the Young Professionals Taking Over the Floor panel. So let's go!
Young professionals taking over the floor. To chair the session, I'd like to welcome Lucia Doval. I'm delighted to hand over to the next generation of translators.
Welcome to the Young Professionals Taking Over the Floor panel. Let me introduce the speakers on this panel. Adrian Probst, Ekaterina Pliassova, Filipe Stankovic, and Krisztina Lapu. Let's get to it. Is there anything you wish you were taught but was missing in your studies?
One thing I always say that was missing in my studies was a focus on freelancing. You know, how do you start a business? How do you write invoices? What is VAT? What is income tax, etc.? And another thing would be networking. Just go out there, talk to people, get involved in the community.
There were no translation studies in Oslo, where I was living at the time. So in order to acquire any kind of skills as a translator, I had to take elective courses and do a lot of my own research.
By the time I finished, I still didn't feel prepared to start a career as a translator. I was, going where life takes me. So when I set a goal, I found this one-year postgraduate program that intended to prepare students to be tech-savvy translators, software website localizers, project managers, and computational linguists. I must say most of the curricula should be included in a bachelor's or at latest master's program.
My background is not in translations, it's in economics. I sort of stumbled across this industry. I wouldn't say by accident, because my parents own a translation company. My mom got really sick, so I decided to come in and help as much as I could with the company. Free labor. I started by doing translation and review. Then I moved on to project management. I moved to more of a production management sort of role. Did vendor management a little bit as well. Ended up in a more administrative managerial position with being the vice to my mother, who was the CEO, and then now I'm the CEO. Universities and with minister translation courses focusing on being a translator. And there's just so many more positions in the industry that need to be filled and need qualified professionals.
In my BA in Translation and Interpreting, I missed a stronger role of audiovisual translation. I think audiovisual translation is a huge field with a huge demand of professionals these days. And then in my MA, I missed some training on accessible filmmaking and creative media accessibility. I see an increasing demand, especially from filmmakers and content creators. That's what I missed. And my MA in audiovisual translation, I think it should have a place in it. How was your start into the profession? What helped or who helped? And what mistakes did you make?
My start into the profession was, first of all, very late. And it was because I didn't feel prepared. Just start. Don't listen to this negative thought.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect. When you think you know more than you actually do. I think that was definitely an issue at the beginning for me. I had read all these books. It turns out that there's a lot to be learned on the field.
So I got my first job in the language industry right after my bachelor's degree. I literally sent out one application to a translation agency as a project manager. The start into freelancing was then later on. I met a lot of people who did what I thought would be amazing to do, which is freelance translating. I got introduced to people. I introduced myself to people, especially online on Facebook groups. There was a Russian translator called Simon Akramayev, who was a big inspiration. And now, 6 years later, I feel honored that I can be also kind of an inspiration. I started the YouTube channel, as you mentioned, called Freelance Verse, where I give people advice.
Your content is definitely useful and interesting for many of us.
So I really love cinema and I really love linguistics. So it was really just a matter of time. I chased the job and tried and tried and tried. I was just super stubborn. In the end, somebody had mercy on me and then the snowball just started rolling. The other thing that really helped me is joining my local association. Navu, there I received so much support, so much help. There's so much information. There's a lot of already experienced people there who know a lot about the industry. And in terms of mistakes in the beginning, I felt very vulnerable to criticism. My advice would be that criticism is a good thing. You should listen to your so-called elders because they know what they're talking about.
I became a freelance translator before finishing my MA and 2 years after finishing my BA. Between my BA and my MA, I spent a whole year making a lot of mistakes. I made a really poor CV. I sent some CVs asking for a job instead of offering my services to places that only worked with freelancers. I applied for job postings like dubbing head supervisor at Netflix. I didn't lack of self-esteem, that was for sure, but that was a waste of time. I also made some good decisions. I had some great reference at the beginning. Pablo Romero Fresco, he showed me an exciting perspective on audiovisual translation and media accessibility. Javier Pérez Alarcón, who is an experienced audiovisual translator who selflessly taught me a lot on how the industry actually worked. I worked on my social media presence. I started sharing content and consuming translation content. I started making connections. I joined the Spanish and Galician Translators Associations. I eventually stopped asking for a job and started offering my services. After I had my first clients, of course, there were some new things for me to learn, like how to negotiate rates, how to organize myself, how to track my productivity, how to mark some limits and take care of my mental health. I'm still learning, we never stop learning, do we? Let's now talk about the present. Filipe, as the CEO of a translation agency, what are, in your opinion, the most interesting developments currently happening in the industry?
The first thing that's pretty obvious that's been happening over the last few years is consolidation. You see a lot of the really big companies buying some of the mid-sized companies. Traditionally, the translation industry has been an industry of scope, not scale. There's a lot more benefits to be really small than to be really big. Maybe the tables have turned. Maybe now being big pays off more than being really small. And that's what a lot of companies are gambling on.
Krisztina, what are your thoughts on the increasing use of machine translation technology?
The increasing use of machine translation, of course, brings challenges to both individual translators and language service provider companies. One of the top reasons why translators oppose post-editing is that the output they have seen so far was really bad. The machine translation output will be just as good as your machine translation engine.
Ekaterina, how do you see the audiovisual translation industry?
There's just more content than there's ever been. Audiovisual translators will not suffer for shortage of work for a good while yet. However, there is machine translation as well. It's hard to consolidate livable fair rates, especially today in this volatile economy with inflation and so on. The audiovisual industry is struggling to keep up.
Adrian, you're a content creator with more than 18,000 subscribers on YouTube. I'm sure you've added so much value to them. How do you think social media has helped you?
It's a double-edged sword. Me personally, I only do professional things on there. It's an amazing tool. It opens so many doors. Not everyone needs to make videos, but you should make use of what you have, what you're good at. Reach out to everyone, reach out to all of us here. Ask for help.
I'd like to mention social media as a translation mode itself. It's evident that video is gaining ground on social media, and subtitles are increasingly needed. Actually, one of my first clients was an Instagram influencer. So I would encourage subtitlers to reach content creators and offer collaboration. It's time to talk about the future. How do you see the industry and yourself in 10 years?
Accessibility will be really big. It's growing at a very huge pace. So if you are new, starting out, I would strongly recommend specializing in either audio description or SDH or anything like that. Also, I think there will be a possible trend back to basics, like direct work with directors, auteurs, art houses, and production companies.
I'm curious to see whether or how much the discussion from pro versus contra machine translation will shift to generic versus specific, specialized, customized machine translation. I don't think the human factor will ever disappear. It's also not realistic that machine translation or technologies will become less important.
On the subject of machine translation, I'm pro being used as a choice. There's some bad effects of just passing the whole text through machine translation and having somebody review it. There was some studies done in the 1970s. What they found out was that the longer these teachers have been correcting bad writing, the more likely was their writing to be influenced by the quality of the bad writing as well. This is a phenomenon called habituation.
Technological advances are amazing. It's not something negative, right? You just have to adapt to it and stay on top of your game. I market myself now as rather a whole like language package than just a translator. I market myself consciously as a language specialist. You can shift technological advances to your benefit.
I read once that machines will only replace those who translate like machines, and that resonated with me. I believe that as long as creativity is needed, as long as critical thinking and common sense are needed, humans will be needed and young professionals will be needed. Yeah, I see a place for us in the future. Thank you so much.
I hope you could find some value here. And I just want to thank once again the organizers for counting on me for this conference. It was an amazing experience. I met so many amazing people and colleagues and even friends. Krisztina, Adrian, Ekaterina, Filipe. We really got to know each other and I really hope we can meet again. I know we will. So yeah, thank you and see you next time.